Okay, I declare the Ordinary Council meeting of the 25th of November 2025 held in Council Chambers at Level 2, 388 Hay Street, Subiaco, open at 5:30 p.m. Welcome everyone. On behalf of the City of Subiaco, I acknowledge the Whadjuk Noongar people as the traditional custodians of the land we're meeting on this evening, and I recognise their ongoing connection to this land. I take attendances now, and I see 8 councillors here in person, and a mayor makes 9, so that's great to see. Welcome everyone, and the Chief Executive Officer is joined by 3 directors, and I suppose Director of Development Services is an apology. Welcome to the other staff as well. Okay, I've got a couple of leave of absence requests. The first one is from Councillor Nicola Johnston, seeking leave of absence for the period from the 4th of February 2026 through to the 18th of February 2026 inclusive. Do I have a mover and a seconder for that period of leave? Councillor O'Connor, thank you, and Councillor Jones. Okay, I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour of the leave? Okay, the leave is approved unanimously. Thank you, everyone. The second and final leave application comes from Councillor Danny Fife, requesting leave of absence from the period of the 23rd of January 2026 to the 2nd of February 2026 inclusive. Do I have a mover and a seconder? Councillor Jones and Councillor Johnston, thank you. I'll put that to the vote as well. Councillor Powell, I don't have a vote from you. Yeah, technical difficulties. Thank you. That's carried unanimously. Okay, are there any disclosures of interest this evening, councillors? No? Okay, there were no public questions previously taken on notice, and we did have a public question submitted for this evening from Ms. Elvira Mustafa, who I don't think has turned up, so she can't ask her question. Okay, there's no approved public statements, no petitions or approved deputations, so councillors, I'll ask you to confirm minutes of previous meetings. There's 2 sets actually, the first being the special council meeting of the 21st of October 2025. Do I have a mover and a seconder for those minutes? Councillor De Vries and Councillor Johnston, thank you both. I'll put that to the vote. All those happy with the minutes? Thank you. The minutes are accepted unanimously, and the second set of minutes are those of the Ordinary Council meeting of the 28th of October 2025. A mover and a seconder to accept those minutes, please. Councillor De Vries and Councillor O'Connor, thank you. And again, I'll put that to the vote. Okay, those minutes are accepted unanimously. Thank you. Okay, my announcements this evening essentially relate to 2 subjects. I'll deal with the quickest, easiest one first, not because it was a quick or easy achievement, but because there's a little bit less for me to say. I'd like to extend my congratulations to the city's planning team at the recent Planning Institute of WA Awards, the state awards. They brought home a total of 6 awards for the City of Subiaco, so that's a great achievement, and the 6 awards are displayed nicely behind me, and it's a shame that Alex Petrovski's not here. I won't mention what all of the awards were for, but I'm particularly proud to have seen the city's planning team bring home the Planning Team of the Year award for the Planning Team of the Year award, we'll call it. It's in categories, and basically they were standouts amongst their peers from other local governments of a comparable size to ours. So that's a really great achievement that I think has been a number of years in the making. So I'm sure someone can pass on my thanks and council's thanks, I dare say, to the planning team and to Mr. Petrovski. The other topic on which I thought I would make an announcement is the Civic Centre, or the Civic Precinct redevelopment. I realise there's not a lot of people here to listen to the announcement in person, but I think it's fitting that I update the community now that we're about a week and a half into the consultation period for the Civic Precinct redevelopment project. There have been some healthy levels of responsiveness so far, which is exactly what we want from this process. The feedback has been wide-ranging and much of it is positive, with bookable community spaces and activation of the festival lawn already emerging as popular elements. Looks good, looks incredible, and impressed, delighted and thrills are all direct quotes taken from survey responses. Of course, some feedback is mixed, some feedback is neutral, and some is not supportive of our vision at all, and that's all to be expected. There's concern about tree retention, and of course, cost is an issue not far from the minds of most respondents so far. And this comes as no surprise, as it's certainly been at the forefront of the minds of each elected member and each staff member who have been involved in the project so far. We acknowledge we are talking about large sums of money, and we're very conscious that this comes with a high level of responsibility. So for this reason, we're determined to show that the design concept represents value. What I will say to any community members who ask, and what I think most councillors will say, is that we're not just building an office, we're not just building a council HQ. The community components are significant, and this is a project for the entire Subiaco community, now and for the next 50 to 100 years. Some respondents will ask if we've considered XYZ, and you should continue to ask such things in case something has been missed or we've got it wrong. But do know that a huge amount of planning and consideration and the taking of professional advice has occurred to get us this far. There really is little that is not that we have not taken the time to consider. Now, the purpose of the consultation exercise is to gather as much feedback as possible, and we want to know what this community wants from their space now and for future generations. There's substantial amounts of information on the city website, which I encourage interested parties to look at. And please complete the short survey via Have Your Say, attend one of the city's listening posts, and fill in a feedback postcard available at the library, at Lord's, and at customer service here at 388 Hay Street. I can advise that the decision has already been made to extend the consultation through to the 31st of December 2025, and we're doing this because we can. We have the time and it is important. The idea is, of course, not to slip this in during the Christmas and New Year period, but to extend the month-long consultation process that has already begun, well before Christmas shutdowns and well before school holidays have commenced. City staff will continue to monitor feedback and update the FAQs on our website to address information gaps and areas of interest and uncertainty as they come in. And we'll be publishing updates via our usual channels through to the end of the extended consultation period. So thank you to everyone out there who's provided feedback already, and please keep it coming. Okay, councillors, now it is time for the decision-making part of the meeting, and there's several officer reports contained in tonight's agenda which don't have special voting requirements and which are not the subject of any proposed amendments or alternative motions. So the possible en bloc vote I have in front of me would consist of items AR1, CR1, CR2, CR3, CR4, C3, C4, C6, AR2 and AR3. So just to confirm, that's AR1, C1, C2, C3, C4, C6, AR2 and AR3, the last two items being confidential items. Are there any of those items, councillors, that you want to pull from the en bloc vote? Okay, do I have a mover and a seconder to accept the en bloc resolution? Councillor De Vries and Councillor Jones, thank you. I'll put the en bloc item to the vote. Thank you, councillors. All of those items are carried unanimously, which for those watching means that those items have been carried as per the agenda, as per the officer recommendations, without amendment. Okay, fortunately we did have an alternative submitted in relation to one agenda item, which means there's still one item to debate. We can go straight to item C5, the tender for the Mount Claremont Depot Architect Services. The officer recommendation is of course as per the published agenda, and we've got an alternative submitted by Councillor Pine. First, do I have a mover and a seconder for the officer recommendation on C5? Councillor O'Connor, thank you, and Councillor Jones, seconding. Councillor O'Connor.
Thank you, and through you, Mayor McMullen. I first want to congratulate staff on getting a management order from the state government for this piece of land. It's been a few years of negotiations to get to this point, and it's a really good outcome for the city because obviously it's the gold standard to have city infrastructure on state land. It means that any private land that we own can work harder and can earn an income for us. This site is going to provide significantly improved services to the city. The current arrangement, having seen it yesterday, is not sustainable. It doesn't provide a good working environment for staff. The city's been already working closely with the town of Claremont and the town of Vincent about what works will be necessary on site to avoid duplication of some facilities, and I believe a working group or some similar arrangements already been operating to facilitate that. However, there are a range of works that will be necessary to the area that's solely under our management that we do need to start planning for, and this contract to engage the services of an architect will start that process. Getting concept plans will enable meaningful discussions with the other two local governments who may be at different stages in their own deliberations for what they want for this site. So I would like to get the ball rolling on this project as soon as possible and support the motion on that basis.
Thank you. Councillor Jones.
Thank you, and through you, Mayor. It's taken extensive work by the administration to secure the management order over the former Western Power land at Mount Claremont as a site to replace the former operations centre on Upham Street. Since that site was vacated, many of the operations staff have been temporarily based on a small block of land over which the city has no security of tenure and from which they could be evicted at very short notice. Staff facilities there are very basic, to say the least, and therefore there's an urgent need to find a more permanent home for them. This newly obtained site is ideal for that purpose and will allow the city to construct operations facilities that should last for many decades. Importantly, the existing buildings are structurally quite sound and should be relatively easy to adapt to suit the city's requirements. However, we're now at the point where the officers require the expertise of an external architect in order to progress the project to the concept design phase. Accordingly, they've issued a request for tender for architect services in July this year, and after reviewing all the submissions, they're recommending that we award the tender to MPS Architects. The consultancy agreement which went with the RFT, includes the right of the city to terminate the agreement without cause, in which case the city would only have to pay for services already provided. This provides flexibility for the city to adjust the project scope and minimises the budgetary commitment going forward, while still signalling to the architect that the city expects them to be on board for the life of the project. The initial concept design stage will cost about $100,000, and funding for this is already included in this year's budget. Once this work has been completed, the city will have a much better understanding of the expected capital works, and it will then be up to this council to decide how best to proceed. Until we make that decision, there will be no further financial commitment under this tender. Indeed, all further funding for this project will need to be approved by this council in future budgets. So it's important to have the concept design completed in good time for next year's budget process. This is a significant capital project, and I'm pleased that the council will have the opportunity to review the project budget before proceeding past the concept design phase. In respect of the RFT process itself, the officers have followed standard procedures in issuing the RFT and evaluating the various responses. Most RFTs only receive a few responses, so this one looks to have been more competitive than many that the city deals with. It's therefore important that officers have used an objective method for assessing them based on predetermined qualitative criteria and value for money. I'm confident that the tender is being awarded to the respondent best suited to fulfilling the city's requirements. I'm concerned that failing to award the tender at this time will result in the city having to issue another RFT. As well as creating extra work for the officers, which will probably lead to the same outcome, I feel that we will be risking unnecessary reputational damage. There's also a risk that businesses might be less willing to expend the resources to submit responses if they feel that the council might not accept the winning tender. In summary, it's the appropriate time for the city to engage the services of an architect in order to progress the depot project. The officers have followed the correct RFT processes to select a suitable tender response, and I'm confident that officers will keep the elected members well informed about the progress of the concept design phase so that we can provide oversight of this project to build a sorely needed new depot for the city of Subiaco. I see no justification for not supporting the officer's recommendation at this time, and I commend the motion.
Thank you, Councillor. Any speakers against? Councillor Pine.
I'd like to thank the city for bringing forward this proposal to the council. The depot project is one of the big rock projects for the city in terms of establishing some new infrastructure and is likely to cost several $1 million. Whilst awarding an architect at this point in time is an approach that can be taken. The architect has been, the proposal is essentially from concept design all the way to construction. What is not clear in the proposal is at which point in time what decision will be brought back to the council in terms of approving the concept design as an example, or even approving the design scope that we provide into the architect in terms of what we want. I feel with significant projects, it is important to really understand what is the minimum scope that we could require to be spent, as opposed to a project that has the minimum scope plus a lot of add-ons, because all these other add-ons compared to the current status would need to be justified. So one of the points that I want to make is actually being clear about what is the scope that we're asking the architects to do the design on, and all the add-ons as well, and being clear about what is the cost of the minimum scope versus the scope and all the add-ons. The second point I want to make is really around the governance of this project, being clear about what are the decision points that will be brought back to the council before work starts being undertaken. The proposal suggests that this is a phased project, which is basically a series of projects that could be approved over time. What's really important when you're starting a large project with phased project is really understanding the governance of the overall thing so that we don't lose sight of the whole thing, whilst different parts of it can actually be approved separately. So what I would request is really a deferral to provide a little bit more information about the scope of the tender that we're about to undertake, as well as the decision points over time, and understanding what decision points will the council have versus what decision points will the staff and the CEO have.
Thank you. A speaker for the officer recommendation. Councillor de Vries, thank you. A question, yep.
Yeah, through you, Mayor. This is just a question relating to the scope that will have been given to the architects, or will be given should they proceed with this. What degree of scope have they been given, and has this previously been provided to council in any form at all? Thank you.
Director of Corporate Services.
Yes, thank you. Through your presiding member. Yes, a basic scope was provided as part of the tender documentation. It was circulated to the elected members earlier today. It's an early scope formulated based on the work of an internal working group. The understanding with the architect would be, though, that it's not necessarily that we will end up delivering all of those things, but that we want their assistance in making for a clever design and, helping us to prioritise if needed would be the typical remit of an architect as well.
Yeah, through you for Director Williston. Again, the stages of this would be to come back to council once the project's been designed and then the costings have been effectively given. What do you expect would be the number of stages? Because there's obviously quite a few stages. Could you just outline what they might be? Thank you.
Thank you, and through you, presiding member. So, on the one hand, the stages would be similar to any capital works project in terms of there's a concept, a detailed design and proceeding to construction, and we would keep elected members updated as we would for other capital works projects. So, for example, through elected members' bulletins where elected members can request workshops if they, of course, elected members can request a workshop at any time. Plus, we would typically do workshops at key design stages. So, for example, you recall we did a workshop on Rockaby Road South earlier this year around the design treatment. So it is for council to determine if it wants to put in place further explicit checkpoints, as Councillor Jones mentioned, nearly called you Councillor Russell. Sorry, now I've distracted myself. The budget is really a key catch in terms of any capital works get approved through the annual budget process, and also the CEO has a delegation to approve tenders up to 300k. So, but I hope that based on all of the capital works that we've done to date, that you have trust that we will always come to you and take you through the process. But of course, that doesn't mean that we can't put in place additional checks as council so desires. Now, just going back to the question again around the phases. So there could be additional layers of phasing in this project, depending, for example, if you want to do part A, part B, part C. They're over years, for example. An architect will help us to determine whether that is something that would be a good idea to do. That kind of phasing can end up costing more money over time, but it helps to, spread the costs over time. So, but an architect will be well placed to help us determine what the actual phasing and timing would likely be.
Councillor DeVries is speaking for the motion.
Thank you, and I will be supporting this motion, but also thanking Councillor Pine, who's just newly elected, for bringing this to our attention so that we can discuss it and more fully flesh this out. As I know, being a new councillor, that's really a big step, and thank you so much for doing that. Again, I think getting this management order was a win for our city. We've had our staff being across multiple temporary fragmented facilities since the closure of Upham Street Operations Centre in 2020. So this is a win that staff need, that we want for the outdoor and ground staff. We want facilities that are suitable, that are long-term, that will give them a real sense of being part of the bigger community of staff, not feeling like they're left on the fringes, which I'm sure at times they must feel. So I think it's really important for the safety, wellbeing and productivity of staff that this facility is progressed. I agree with Councillor Jones's point that this tender process was robust. And yes, I do trust staff did an absolutely professional job and have chosen the most suitable architect. To delay this project may require a new tender process, and this is cost in terms of staff time, could cost more in the final analysis. So I believe we have to consider those factors when we make our decision today. Certainly timing is a factor. I think it's 6 months now since July, since the tender went out. We had delays during the caretaker period. I think we need to progress it now before further delays may suggest that we, are not engaging in the process, that the management orders, there's an expectation, I'd say. I also think that it's clear the architect will be important in exploring and articulating possibilities. And we have heard from staff that there may be significant reductions in costs through using the architect to look at ways in which that can be reduced. I think the staging of this and the long-term planning again requires an architect. I do agree with Councillor Pine that we do need to have regular updates. We do need to have opportunities for discussing decisions as they go, and I think that's something to take on board from tonight's discussion. But I certainly do support that we progress this at this stage, and again commend staff for the hard work they've done, and no doubt the many hours of discussing this. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there a speaker against the motion? Sure, now's a good time for some questions. Councillor Burns.
Thank you, Mayor McMullen. And I would ask a little bit of indulgence, seeing this is the only matter that we have to discuss tonight, and everything else is put to bed, so I don't think anybody's in any great rush, and the food's probably not even warm yet. But that will be your decision. Now, Firstly, my first question through the chair would be what consider, I wasn't going to put it this way, but I've heard comments about urgency in getting this done, and we need it straight away. And considering that, on top of the fact that this is a utilitarian project, what considerations did the administration give to a design and construct?
Ms. Wollaston. Councillor Burns, just press the button.
Thanks, and through your presiding member for that one, I might defer to the coordinator of capital projects, Jeremy Graff, who's on the screen at the moment. Jeremy, if you're there.
Mr. Graff.
Apologies, I just had to quieten my child. So yes, in response to that question, what consideration did we give to a design and construct? It was one of the options we considered, but based on previous experience with our construction projects, we went with the architectural design process instead of a design and construct to a builder. We feel we have more control over the design and the design outcomes if we work closely with an architect, and in particular with this kind of site where we can where we're looking for adaptive reuse. We feel that working closely with an architect will get a better outcome.
Councillor Burns.
Sure. Could Mr. Graff explain his what sounded like bad experiences? And I'm not saying that he said that verbatim, but he talked about past experience having problems with that's what I heard, having problems with design and construct. Could he give me a little more detail on that? What problems we've had in the past to move us towards an architect?
No, I didn't have problems with design and construct. It was our experience with working with an architect found that we got a good experience and ended up with a better outcome working closely with an architect rather than design and construct through a builder.
If I can just join in, Councillor Burns, back to you.
Thanks. Okay. Okay, so am I to take it that we like architects, and I'm just paraphrasing this, we like architects and we've never done design and construct, but we like architects. Is that what I'm hearing? Or I'm just not getting it here. Okay, it's utilitarian. We want it quickly. Okay, we're in a marketplace where this is not an unusual process to go. And does anybody need me to tell them what design and construct is?
Councillor Burns, I'm conscious that you'll have your time, just like everyone else, to debate the item, and I think I know where you're going. Let me just explain what I'm bringing to your attention. I just wonder whether you're asking questions now or whether you're extending your debate. So if you can keep these to questions with a forensic purpose that help you make up your decision, I think that will benefit everyone. But look, I think we've heard that question, and the director was on the tip of, on the verge of answering it. So please go ahead.
Sure, and thank you, presiding member. And the CEO may have some additional points, or maybe some of the same points. Some of the things that we've considered with this contract is that we think that we can do parts of the project in-house more cheaply as well, and so that's a consideration that we'd like to be able to consider in working with an architect.
CEO.
Yeah, probably the other thing I'd add is, given the particular type of infrastructure, there's quite a bit there that will be repurposed as well. Working with an architect will also assist us to provide options to council in terms of how fast or slow we move, because we might do just one particular element if that's what council consider once they've got that feedback in terms of the total cost of ownership versus optionality, also in consideration of other projects that are happening at the same time as well. So I think this process assists us to bring that information to council in a sort of a coherent way for decision-making purposes as to how much all at one time, or do we break it down into meaningful components that make sense in terms of both our operational needs but also the financial considerations of council.
Thank you. Councillor Burns.
Thank you. I'll move on. All right. Just applying some broad mathematics. if $3.3 million gets us a $64 million civic precinct, which would be a factor of 20, am I okay in applying $700,000 by a factor of 20 and getting to $14 million as a guesstimate? Or is there no correlation between the tender amount and an envisaged total amount?
Well, just before anyone writes this week's headlines, it's not a $14 million build, as far as we know. CEO, please answer the question.
So there's a few components to it, and obviously incorporated in it is each of the elements in terms of project management as well. At the moment, we need some detailed work around each of the particular areas. So we just have a sort of a broad plan of what might occur, and we've had some QS done on that, which has been provided to all the elected members. And we were sort of very surprised in terms of that QS, because it appeared that given the lack of information, there was very high rates in comparison to what we know we're getting through our existing contracts. And so that's why we felt it was appropriate to dive deeper into the aspects that would be at the Mount Claremont depot to be able to provide some more clarity so that we could bring a QS back to elected members that provided, greater close, I suppose, closer to what was likely if we were to go to tender. Whereas at the moment, if we went to tender for that piece of work, we think it would be, probably be come out it because there's a lack of clarity in terms of the elements. So the idea is that it could be that if based on rates that in some cases were double what we're paying at the moment. So we think it's appropriate to use an architect to work through that process to refine the costs. So it could be somewhere in that vicinity, but somewhere a lot less than that as well.
Councillor Burns.
Okay, for the benefit of the non-elected members that are participating in this meeting, could I have the numerics on what you just talked about? We talked about numbers, and it could be and it could be. Could we just have some broad numbers? I mean, I don't think it's a secret, but we're spending, the only number in the public's hearing is $700,000, and you just started alluding to numbers that we're aware of. Could we make our ratepayers aware of them?
Generally, we don't provide preliminary QS, particularly as when we looked at those, we felt that some of the rates per metre square were double what we're paying. So in that regard, that's why we're doing this exercise, because we were not confident that the QS was even close to the mark.
Thank you, but I'm still having trouble. We seem to have all numbers everywhere. I'll accept that. Okay, because this is an impossible market to build in, so I'll take it. You're talking about double this and you don't think it's double and blah, that's fine. Okay, however, we have settled on one thing, and that's $700,000. Okay, but I'm hearing this is fixed and this is all grey, but to make that not grey, we need to commit to a $700,000 tender. But the reason we need to give them $700,000 is so we can understand what we've done.
I mean, you've been on council long enough to know what a question is and what a debate is.
Well, it's a question. I'm trying to get to it. So, these are questions.
Your questions have been going for 9 minutes already. The standing orders say you've got 5 minutes to debate. Already you've given yourself twice as much as what you'd normally have in debate. So all I'm asking, Councillor Burns, is that you ask questions that you need to ask in order to form a view and to enlighten the councillors, and then we move on and you debate how you want to debate.
I am asking questions, okay? But in my mind, I am. Okay, well, here's my question. This is not my full-time job. The director just said that something was issued this morning. I don't live by my council emails, so I haven't seen what's even been referred to as this additional information this morning. So could I hear what that is? Because as I said, I don't sit there all day looking at council emails. I get a lot of other stuff too. Not that I'm avoiding my council duties. But could somebody tell me what was sent this morning?
Yeah, maybe just a description of the information that's been circulated. It probably came from Director Corporate Services. It wouldn't have come from the CEO. So please, Ms Wollaston.
So we provided, on the request of an elected member, the briefing that was provided to the brief that was provided as part of the tender documentation that was provided to bona fide tenderers who wished to submit, and that included things like the functional specification and a very indicative QS, just noting that the caveat with that QS is that, the whole point of working with an architect is to be able to establish a real basis of the cost based on what we actually intend to proceed with, and that will certainly become transparent as we proceed with this project.
Councillor Burns.
Okay. Again, it seems the QS, nobody's going to say the number, but I won't. That can just stay in the ether. All right. Finally, then, there's talk about starting and stopping. Okay, so we're going to apply a $700,000 tender, but it can stop. Just for my absolute, and this is a question, so let's not hear it as not being a question. Is this a situation where it's $700,000 and it's stopping at points, okay, key points, and the administration will ask us, okay, to turn the tap back on? Not $700,000 and we have to ask to turn the tap off. Now, do you need more? Do you get where I'm going here with this? So it's 700. We're giving you 700. Okay. When are you going to say the water's running? Okay, and 100's gone down the pipe. Okay, and we would like you, and the tap's getting turned off. We need your permission, elected members, to turn the tap back on, or the whole thing stops. Which is it? Thank you.
Ms. Williston.
Sure. So, there's a couple of ways of looking at that. For one, it is up to council absolutely to determine at what points they want the administration to proceed with anything. Approving this tender as it is, all of the stages are there, and we would commit to returning to you as we normally do through capital works projects with updates and to ensure that everybody is satisfied to proceed. And of course, as outlined, the budget process provides and tender process provides that any capital works in future years would need to be subject to council approval if you want to put in place further steps to gain assurance in terms of stop at this point and start again at this point. That is absolutely open to council to do so.
Thank you for the answer. But that sounded to my ears like the tap was running until 5 of the 9 of us say turn it off. Okay, I was asking. So am I correct in that? We got to turn it off and it's running otherwise until we turn it off? Because before we were hearing that it was, I was hearing that at 100, we need $100,000, and that sounds like a stop mark. Okay, and then we got to turn it back on again. So I'm not getting the tap here. Okay, I'm not, sorry, I'm a dummy. Okay, but
no one called you that, councillor. But
I did. I called myself that.
Just so we're all talking about the same tap, is the tap? Are you asking about whether the tap is left on after 700 and? No. Right. Something odd thousand, or when are we going to turn it on? When are we going to turn it off?
Yeah, no. Is it running, okay, until we turn it off, or is it on until 100,000, which is the number I heard before? At which time the administration goes, the tap's turned off. We need more money. Could you turn the tap back on?
Okay, so it's a question about, I suppose, how Councillor Pine put it, decision points. Ms. Williston.
So we can certainly commit to do that with you through the workshop process, for example. So put in place workshops at key decision points to go, would you like us to continue proceeding? Or, as I mentioned, it is open to council determine if you want to put in place formal council decision-making points. The only mechanism for you to do that is to decide to do that. So it's open for you to do that.
I appreciate the answers, but unless somebody's going to convince me during the debate I'm wrong, okay, this sounds like the tap's running, okay, and the faucet's broken, right, until 5 of us get a wrench out, but I'll leave it at that.
Okay, did you want to take your 5 minutes now and continue the debate? Okay, well, look, I thought we would have a speaker against. We can still have a speaker against the officer recommendation if there's someone so inclined. Councillor Johnston, thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Look, I share concerns. I share, a number of concerns that have been raised. I think it's been mentioned about the timing of the tender and that it went out before caretaker period. So if we don't progress with this now, it would need to be retendered potentially. I've also been advised by staff that may not be the case, but perhaps that could be clarified. Through you, Mayor.
Director, Corporate Services.
Yep, so thank you through your presiding member. So usually when you tender, there is a time frame during which the quotations are binding. That recently expired, but typically in this situation it's understood that we're very close to making a decision and tenderers would be keen to get our business and would generally adhere to what they have provided. However, the longer that we defer a decision, the more likely they will be to go, hey, there's been a bit of passage of time, we want to reconsider. So it's really just a matter of how much passage of time, and you can't put a finger on exactly how long that is before it would make more sense to retender.
Thank you, Director Wollaston. So if this was to be deferred, potentially it could come back to Council for approval in some form and not need to be retendered, depending on the passage of time. However, either way, I don't think whether we need to retender or not should be a key decision-making factor for us. This is a significant infrastructure project. We've got a number of significant, along with another significant infrastructure project that we've got to do. And I think, if it is the case that people need more time to flesh this out more fully, then having to retender shouldn't be, in the scheme of things, won't be a big cost. I think number of elected members would benefit from having more input and discussion with staff to consider cheaper ways to do the rebuild and refurb. Councillor Burns has mentioned build and design and engaging a builder rather than an architect, which would presumably be cheaper. So it doesn't sound like that's really been explored and that hasn't been put to us. I think there's questions around the staged and phased approach and when that would come back to Council for consideration and review, and that's not stated and not clear. So I personally would like more clarity around it and to have considered more options to ensure that this is going to be a really tight budgeted infrastructure rebuild or renovation. Thank you.
Thank you. A speaker for the officer recommendation. Councillor Fife.
Up until just yesterday morning, I was considering putting in an alternative to delay the project for the reasons outlined. On reading the tender document carefully, I'm satisfied that there are sufficient breaks going forward in terms of we get a concept plan. If we don't want to go any further with that, we don't have to go any further with that. I think in visiting the site yesterday, we had several of the officers there, the sense that there was a diligent and cooperative and informed and considered approach that involved both the City of Claremont and Vincent with working groups, and that the complexity involved in drainage, crossover to a new road, refurbishing or demolishing or partly demolishing and refurbishing several existing well-structured buildings satisfied me that we ought to proceed right now with this to allow the concept design to come back to us. So it's a $100,000 spend. We'll get the concept design. If we don't like it, we can always change it. But this has been in process for a couple of years, this idea that we're going to have this new facility. The sense of
morale that is evident in the city's workers, that this will improve their faith that this is a project is going to go ahead. They're going to have a facility. I think we've got the facility. We need to use it. We need a design that we're going to be satisfied with. All we're committing to do with that tap analogy that you're talking about is turning on the tap to fill this first bucket that says, here is a concept design. That's our commitment at the moment. We can turn it off at any stage. And so my sense is let the council admin do their work, let the project officers do their work, and let's get on with it.
Thank you, Councillor. A speaker against the recommendation. Councillor Burns.
Thank you, Mayor McMullen. Look, councillors, I never harbour ill will to anybody that votes, a different opinion than mine. It doesn't worry me. We're a democracy. I want everybody to vote how they feel, and I appreciate everything the councillor just said, and think the only thing I would offer some doubt is at the $100,000. I got no problems. If I was being asked to vote to spend $100,000 with architects to look at something, no problems at all. I do not believe that we should be in a position where we just go past $100,000 and we just keep going, and somebody's got to put their hand up like me and say, all right, I want to get back into council, and I don't always do it, but all these decisions that are taking place in workshops, okay, well, and I'm not being disrespectful to the director, but we can have workshops and we can send you elected members bulletins and all this sort of stuff. This is where the decisions are made, where the public can come and see us, they can watch it on YouTube. This is where it's done, not in workshops, not in emails, okay? It's done in here, okay? And I personally would like to see, and I don't think it's going to happen, but I would like to see somebody saying, we're going to take $100,000, look at this to see what we've got, okay? And then if we like it, we're going to move forward. Not we're going to do $700,000, and if anybody pops their head in at 100 and says, I want to stop it, then they think you can't sort of, if you've got a, if you think I've hurt you in some way, you can say,
No,
okay.
I don't think you've hurt me. I'm very robust.
Okay, but you seem to be.
Well, I mean, if it gets too hurtful, I'll usually step in, but I think Councillor Fife's going okay, and it's a respectful debate from where I'm sitting. I'm glad that the debate's actually got underway, so please, you've got a few minutes left, Councillor.
Yeah, I wasn't questioning the councillor, right? I'm just saying I'm questioning the fact that they've turned the tap on, turned the tap off, right? I think the taps, in my experience in council has been once that tap goes on, usually they take the handle off the top of it. Anyway, so that thing, look, I'm going to close on this. One thing I do have a problem with, okay, and with no disrespect to Councillor Jones bringing it up, I hear it all the time, reputational damage. My interpretation of that is it always seems to be our reputation to the tenderers. Well, I'm sorry. I don't give a hoot about my reputation to the tenderers. I care about my reputation to the ratepayers. None of the tenderers put me in this chair. A whole bunch of ratepayers did though, okay? So my reputation to them is my concern. So all this reputational damage to people that we're giving money to, I'm sorry. I'll leave it at that. I think everybody's got a pretty good idea, I think. So if you want to think about your reputations, you think about the people that put us here, not people we're cutting checks to. Actually, I will say one other thing, right? If you don't mind. Have I got 30 seconds? The other night, for those who weren't there, the retiring Councillor White told a story about a pig, okay? Great pig, very smart pig, seems to save everybody, okay? No problems at all, you know what I mean? And the farmer loves the pig. Great story, okay? But pig's got a wooden leg, okay? And the final question is, why has the pig got a wooden leg? And he goes, well, you don't want to eat the pig all at once, okay? If anybody didn't get it, he was warning us, don't eat the pig. The pig's our money. You know what I mean? If nobody got the story...
Hang on, I think it's a combination of hearsay and imputing intentions into Councillor White's retirement speech that he may or may not have had. But
I got him to agree to it before.
For those of us who were there, we heard it. We were glad to see him off and the other retiring councillor. Thank you for the debate. Is there a...
Oh, sorry, it was a debate.
That was a debate.
Yeah, thank you.
And it was quite a fair debate and entirely respectful, so thank you. Is there a speaker for the officer recommendation now? Question? Councillor Powell.
Yes, look, thank you. I think it's been a very good debate and a very worthwhile one, actually, because I think it really goes to the heart of the process about how we award tenders. But it's also led me to a couple of questions. I know that there is an alternative on the table about deferring it to February. And it has been mentioned that if this occurs, then we might run out of time for the tender to be accepted. So what sort of timescale would we be looking at if the tender was deferred until February, or a decision on it was deferred until February, and it was required for a new request for tender? What sort of timescale are we looking at?
Director Corporate Services.
Sure, and through you, presiding member, just for clarification, the current alternative on the table been modified a bit over the last couple of days. It doesn't specify a time frame, so it doesn't necessarily say defer to February. It just says defer to allow further consideration of things like the governance milestones. So, you know, if we can work with the elected members to get through that by December, then that may be possible to return in December. If we do need to go into the new year, there is a greater risk that we would need to retender. And then, you know, usually a tender time frame, you need to allow sufficient time to get it out to tenderers and for them to then respond and then for it to be evaluated. So it can be some process. If council elected members also want input into changing or reviewing the tender specifications further, then that will naturally take more time as well. So it depends on what elected members would like to do if the decision is deferred.
The man who sets the agenda has some perspectives. CEO.
Yeah, thanks. I won't talk to the risk or otherwise, but just in terms of tender, generally they're around a 6-month process. But notwithstanding all the other comments that, but they can anywhere between 3 and 6 months from actually the advertising evaluation and then actually awarding. Probably about 4 months is average.
Councillor Powell.
Yes, sorry, Mayor. My laptop has just gone dead, I think. Well, I had a couple of more questions. But look, the next one was, if we don't have an architect in place, is that going to affect our ability to negotiate with the other councils who are also on the site? Would it have any impact at all?
Ms Williston.
Through your presiding member, it wouldn't have any literal impact, just I guess that our negotiations would be less well informed by having some design expertise on hand to inform the negotiations in terms of, you know, what would be a sensible design outcome that we could collaboratively work on together.
Another one is that the tender that we're being asked to look at is well over north of $700,000, and yet $100,000 has been mentioned on a number of occasions as being like a preliminary amount. But if I think this goes to Councillor Burns' point, if we go for the $700,000, you know, which is what the recommendation is, how can we control, when that might cut off? If the project isn't working out, if we don't like some of it, how do we actually terminate it?
CEO.
So the way in which we operate all of the services that we do and projects that we do in terms of capital works is through the process that's been described, and in this there's clear stages within this project, and we generally bring them back when they've done that concept design, and they would workshop with elected members. As council adopt the budget each year, it's in everyone's interest to ensure that that project sort of makes sense and wishes to continue. So it would generally be at that first workshop with elected members. Council, this is where council makes the decisions, 100%. They don't make them in workshops, but there's a pretty clear indication whether the project is progressing well or not, and it would not be in staff's interest to continue a project that was not going to achieve funding by council, who have to adopt that each year by an absolute majority. Hopefully that answers the question.
Councillor Powell.
Thank you. And just one final question. Will the concept design be coming back to council? That essentially is after the first $100,000 or somewhere near that has been spent. Will that be coming back to council before it goes any further? Is that our first gateway?
I suppose that workshop will help in terms of the elected members' temperature in relation to the project and flesh out those issues. And should we do it all at once? Should we do it in compartments? So that would be the opportunity to provide that feedback. If council if the elected members were indicating to us that there was some sort of concern around whether to proceed or not, and as the description's been turn the tap off, then it would not, as I said, it would not be in our interest to proceed unless we put that to council, because we'd want a little bit more certainty prior to the budget being adopted as well. So we could, if that made sense at that point in time, to proceed to bring that to council for to proceed beyond that stage. I imagine that report would probably articulate that issue of, do we do all this all at once, or do we separate this into compartments? So so we certainly could do that. As I said, by June, council would need to, or June, July, council would need to adopt a new budget. If there was no funds, we wouldn't be able to do that, and we wouldn't be able to progress the work. So we would be instructing them as to the architects as to how far to proceed based on our understanding of whether the project was going to proceed. But at that point in time, if council need optionality in terms of how we proceed, we could certainly put a report to council.
Would that require an amendment to have a report to council at that stage?
No, that's not required, because, as I've said, council will be adopting a new budget, and we would not wish to commence the architect to undertake work where we had concern that potentially there wouldn't be the funds in the budget to deliver on it. So it works sort of hand in glove that council always have that with the adoption of the budget. That's why when we go to tender, we always have these break clauses as well. So we would only be liable for the funds of the work that had been undertaken within that year.
Councillor Powell.
Yes, look, I'll speak to the matter if I may, Mayor. I was very much in two minds about this, I've got to say. I think initially I was concerned that there was a paucity of information upon which to make a decision. I think Councillor Fife has also outlined quite well that, a site visit has actually made people far more informed of what's going on and what is involved. And perhaps I might suggest that could have been done earlier, and then some of these matters could have been perhaps discussed at that stage. I would also like to thank the staff, though, for the amount of work, because it's been over years and I've been watching it, enticing the state government to come on board. So, and now I can understand that that they finally got it done, that they're probably quite anxious to move on. That's especially in regard to the conditions of our staff at the work depot. I mean, I don't think their working conditions are satisfactory at all. As in regard to the process, to me, it's a bit of a chicken and egg. You either bring aboard an architect, which I think is quite a good idea, and then they provide the advice and the guidance about where you're going and what you can do. Or the other form of the process is to try and set the scope, which I think is what Councillor Pine is trying to say, that we need to set the scope so that we're telling the architect what needs to be done. In my own view, I think, sort of at the end, I think I'm going to support this recommendation. I think I'm going to support it simply because I think that it is the right way to go, is to get the advice and to know that there are checkpoints along the way at which we will be able to oversee what's actually going on. So I congratulate actually Councillor Pine for bringing it along, because I think it's made us think very carefully about this tender and about this process. But I will be supporting the officer recommendation. Thank you.
If it's brief and a bona fide question, you're more than welcome.
It was generated by that. From the South. Thank you, Mayor McMullen. I'm not. Look, the horse is bolted on this one, so I'm not trying to fight it. Okay, I just need some clarity. The CEO just talked about this $100,000 and talking about it in a workshop and gauging it. You know, it's again, this is not verbatim, but it's like the feel of the room. If we don't think you're liking it, then we think it just seems a little. To me, that's not very clear. It's kind of like we're having a workshop and I'm just trying to gauge how everybody feels, right? You know what I mean? And this is my problem. You know what I mean? How about a feeling, show of hands or anything other than, well, we just sort of, I looked around the room and some people were, whatever. I'd like some sort of legal clarity to what creates the impression that we're happy campers, or do I need to scream at the top of my voice, you out of your bloody mind, okay, to get some attention? I just don't get this. It's just too fluffy for my. I just like, look, we look like we're going ahead with it, but I can count, as I've said many times in here, I can count. So could somebody explain what creates the administration's decision? I think these guys love it, except for that bloke or whatever. Anyway, thanks. If any sort of clarity, we're being recorded that goes on record that I can look later on that what causes a decision, that it's going to come back into this room for a decision, not be decided in a workshop while everybody's eating pizza. CEO.
Thank you. Thanks for the question. It's a good question. There is no decision making other than here. So the council controls when or not, and there's a whole range of matters in which that happens. Obviously, as CEO, I'm required to put matters on the agenda. In these workshops, what I'm referring to is when we're doing a workshop, if there's a lack of clarity that when you go to adopt the budget, you're going to take this out, that's giving us a pretty good indication that it'd be best to bring this report back to council. So that's sort of how we operate. It's not necessarily ask for a show of hands, because we don't, but to adopt a budget each year, there has to be an absolute majority of council. So we want to put that up, knowing that the information that's contained in there, which we, as I said, we include every tender that's going out that year, et cetera, et cetera. We've got that budget workshop that goes through. So this is the only place decisions can be made, but we're conscious that we don't wish to ask for any of our suppliers to undertake work that there wouldn't be sufficient budget to pay them, because contractually we'd be required to. So in managing that contract, we're very conscious of future budgets, and that's the way in which we work with elected members to find out the certainty of projects or not just await the adoption of the budget. So if there was some concern, as I said, and we felt this is a good gatepost to actually bring this back to council for a decision, we would do that.
Thanks, CEO. I'll briefly enter the debate to speak in favour of the officer recommendation, because I simply wanted to make the point that whilst good matters have been useful matters have been raised in debate, they're not, as I see them, reasons to not award a tender. There's reasons, I think, why we would stop and pause prior to embarking on future projects of a significant scale and actually document and formalise the project governance, as it were. But that is not to say that that we achieve these things this time round by delaying the award of the tender. I think we're conflating different things if we say we can't award the tender because we're concerned about TAPS staying on later on. I think they're two different discussions and two areas which we can quite easily work on future projects, but also this one. I've heard pretty clearly from the CEO that he's not going to go ahead and build a depot without checking in with council. He's said it on record, and I haven't seen the CEO take the bull by the horns and run anything through to completion without checking in with council where appropriate. I've heard it stated in no uncertain terms that that at the design concept phase there will be an opportunity to check in with council. That doesn't involve decisions being made in closed workshops. What it means is a chance to discuss the concept, which we haven't even seen yet, and to gauge at what point council wants to see a matter brought back to the council chambers for a formal decision to be made. I think that's entirely appropriate in this type of decision-making setting and at this stage of a project of this scale, because at the moment we don't have the concept. All we know is vague details, and that is why I would suggest, need to allow the work to start by appointing the architect, and we can take a measured approach as we progress through the project. So no taps are going to be left on as far as I can see, and the way these things always work, there will be regular check-ins with council to understand where the decision making or information gaps lie and where further advice is needed. All the areas for improvement, which I think have been heard loud and clear, are not, as I see it, reason to delay the awarding of the tender. So I'm quite happy to put my vote behind the officer recommendation, and given that I'm the last person to have debated, I will step out of the debate. I'll ask Councillor O'Connor, who moved the motion, to close, if you wish, and then we'll vote.
Thank you, Mayor McMullen. And thank you, councillors, for a robust debate on this item. We've heard that the scope of the architectural contract has been designed to be broad so that it will deliver a base level of functionality as well as exploring the potential for additional elements. And this approach will give the City and Council the capacity to fully explore all the possible options for the site. And at that time, consideration could be given to the staging that Councillor Pine has mentioned in terms of construction. But it will also provide a good basis for discussions with the town of Vincent and the town of Claremont. It'll also enable consideration to be given on whether the City can use some of our existing contractors for some of the work and thereby achieve some of those savings that we've also are front of mind. We've heard that the Council will receive regular updates on this project, and I personally think that a workshop is the most appropriate forum for the concept design to come to us for initial discussion and consideration. As has been noted several times, the annual budget process provides Council the opportunity to review and approve funding for this project, and Council can call this matter back to a meeting should we so wish. I appreciate Councillor Byrne's concerns about the tap being on and running, but I am comfortable that Council will have sufficient oversight of this project. As the tender was issued nearly 6 months ago, I am concerned that a further delay introduces risks to the tender process and we may need to re-tender. Whether or not that results in reputational damage to the City or not, re-tendering may result in us looking at a more expensive quote in a few months' time with little real benefit or change. I am reassured that there are sufficient safeguards around this project to progress this contract and support the officer motion to engage services of an architect on this project.
Thank you, Councillor. I'll put the item to the vote. Okay, the item's carried 6-3. Thank you, councillors. Okay, there were no elected members' motions of which previous notice was given. There's no urgent business that I'm aware of this evening. So given that we decided 2 confidential items on block, what I'll do now is I'll read out what those 2 decisions were. They were AR2 and AR3. Okay, on AR2, the Fleet Management Internal Audit, Council resolved that the Fleet Management Internal Audit is noted. On AR3, Local Government Insurance Services Safety Assessment 2025. Council resolved that the Local Government Insurance Services 3 Steps to Safety Assessment report is noted. Okay, and they were the only 2 confidential items that we decided on block. Therefore, there's no more business on this evening's meeting, so I'll declare the ordinary council meeting closed at 6:40 p.m. Thank you, councillors, for your inputs, and thank you, staff, for your support and advice.